The House will come to order. Members, please take your seats. Sergeant at Arms.
The House is now in session. All persons not entitled to privilege of the floor, please retire to the gallery.
The members will rise and be led in prayer by Pastor Brian Warren, Gospel Light Baptist Church, Evington, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which will be led by the delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Father, we come to you this morning. We just thank you so much, Lord, for this day that you've given us. God, this opportunity here, Lord, that we have, Lord, to serve you here in this manner. Lord, I pray, God, today that you just help us. Lord, you said in your word that without me you can do nothing. So, Lord, I pray that here today that you'd give the leaders here of Virginia, God, wisdom, the wisdom they need to lead this great state. Lord, we have a great nation, God, that we also serve in, and your word also says, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And so, Lord, I pray that you'd help us today and help the leaders of not just here in Virginia, but all across the great United States, Lord, to seek your face and to seek your wisdom. I pray, God, that you just meet with us here today and to help these leaders, God, to make good, godly decisions, Lord, that would not just help us today, but also in the generations that will come later on. Lord, I pray that you'd bless, Lord, this day. Lord, I pray, God, that you'd help us to remember who you are, where our blessings come from. For, God, you said in your word that the earth is his and the fullness thereof. And so, Lord, I pray this morning that you would just help us to be mindful, God, of who you are, all the things that we do and say and decisions that we make that don't just affect us today, but in the generations ahead. God, we love you and we thank you for all that we know you're going to do. And these things we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I'd love.
The members will answer the roll call by indicating their presence on the electronic voting board. Clerk will close the roll.
Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Pursuant to House Rule 3, I've examined and approved the Journal of the House of Delegates for January 30th, 2025. Motions and resolutions under Rule 39, pursuant to the provisions of Rule 40, are now in order. Does the clerk have any announcements or communications?
No announcements or communications. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, in this first portion of the morning hour, pursuant to House Rule 40, the Speaker requests that you use your request to speak button for the agenda items listed for reference up on the voting board.
Delegate from Campbell, Delegate Zier.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for an introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our invocation this morning was given by Pastor Brian Warren. Pastor Warren is a faithful minister in our community. He shared with me that his ministry is inspired and invigorated by the transformative power of the gospel. He's delighted and fulfilled to witness the practical miracle of families coming together in the unifying power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That gives meaning to our earthly walk. It answers life's deepest questions. Pastor Warren's family is with us also. His wife, Amy, son, Bryce, and daughter, Brianna. Let's please give them a warm house welcome.
Welcome to the Capitol today. The delegate from Henrico, Delegate McQuinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just rise for an announcement.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just wanting to announce there's a sign-in sheet for the former Senator Henry R. Marsh that's going around the resolution. Would you please sign on and pass it on? We're trying to get all 96, 98 individuals who are here to sign on to it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Warren, Delegate Oates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a motion.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I move that House Resolution 566 on page 106 of the calendar be passed by until February 5th.
Delegate from Warren, Delegate Oates, moves that House Resolution 566, found on page 106, be passed by until February the 5th. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The delegate from Suffolk, Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for an introduction.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today in the gallery, we have members of the Virginia Education Association. I ask them to please stand. The VEA is the largest union of teachers and school support professionals in the Commonwealth, working for the betterment of public education for every student. The VEA was established in 1863 and is dedicated to advancing quality instruction and curriculum, adequate funding, and excellent working conditions for Virginia employees. As advocates for public education at both the state and school division levels, some of their priorities are securing competitive salaries as well as increased school funding, so Virginia can retain and attract great teachers and support staff. Also, joining them is the Franklin City Education Association as well. This is their first year of having representation in the Education Association. Franklin Education Association, we have 2 schools in Franklin, S.P. Morton Elementary and Franklin High School. Though they are a small group, they are extremely dedicated to their students and are strong advocates for their teachers and support staff. I know the chair of education, Delegate Razul, has been working tirelessly to make sure we deliver for our teachers, and I hope it will be the will of the body to give them a warm house welcome.
Welcome to the Capitol today. Clerk will announce the next order of business. Pursuant to House Rule 30, the Journal shall reflect that the following members are away on pressing personal business on a granted leave from today's session. Delegates Freitas, Garrett, Marshall, and Wright. Clerk will announce the next order of business.
Mr. Speaker, the second portion of the morning hour reserved for member requests for legislation to move from uncontested block to the regular. There are 3 in the category of House Bill second reading uncontested. Page 12 of the printed calendar, Delegate Carlson's House Bill 1877 out of the block over to the regular calendar, the request of Delegate Batten. Page 14, same category, Delegate Willits, House Bill 1904 out of the block to the regular calendar, the request of Delegate Tran. And finally, Ms. Speaker, same category, page 19 of the printed calendar, Delegate Carrs, House Bill 2154 out of the block over to the regular calendar at the request of Delegate Batten.
Clerk will announce the next order.
Third portion of the morning hour reserved for member requests for legislation to go by for the day. If any such, the motion by the majority leader. There are 2 that I'm aware of. Category of House Bill second regular. On page 23, Delegate Helmers, House Bill 1656, by for the day at the request of Delegate Tran. And same category, page 27 of the printed calendar, House Bill 2087, patroned by Delegate Chin. That one, too, is requested by Delegate Tran to go by for the day. That's all I'm aware of, sir.
Delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the legislation, as announced by the clerk, go by for the day.
Delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring, moves that the legislation, as announced by the clerk, go by for the day. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. Clerk will announce the next order.
And, Mr. Speaker, on this Friday, the fourth and final portion of the morning hour is reserved for member requests for points of personal privilege.
Delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Corner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, we have a full-blown crisis on our hands. Headlines from yesterday: the Northwest Virginia Regional Drug Gang Task Force concluded a 9-month investigation with a large seizure of narcotics. Through the course of the investigation, officers learned of vape shops operating in the town of Front Royal that were selling marijuana and THC vapes. As a result of their operation, the task force seized over 19,000 products containing THC with an estimated street value of close to $1 million, along with 3 firearms yesterday. We have a full-blown crisis on our hands, a crisis that is most evident to parents of teenagers. These pop-up shops selling unlicensed, unregulated, and unsafe products containing marijuana and other substances being sold in all of our communities. These sellers are flagrantly violating the laws we passed in recent years pertaining to marijuana and enforcement. Products being sold in these shops have been analyzed by independent toxicologists and found to contain mold, asbestos, rat feces, and have been analyzed to hold a host of other toxic substances that can and are making consumers, and most especially our children, very sick. These products are being sold often with zero age verification and no quality control or testing. In other cases, these products are being mislabeled and they contain marijuana or synthetic THC. We passed bipartisan legislation in this body 2 years ago to combat the sale of these products. But as we have seen in our communities, having our laws isn't working. These products are still winding up in the hands of our children. The Commonwealth is falling short when it comes to protecting our kids. While this body continues to wrestle with the bigger regulatory framework of a cannabis market, I refuse to wait another year to tackle these harmful products being sold throughout our communities. And I honestly don't believe a regulatory framework by itself will fix this, because these products are already illegal, and yet they are still everywhere. I had a college student tell me last week, my classmates and I know that the medical cannabis is safe, yet when we're running low on money, we often will take the risk we know it is to buy these products in stores. Mr. Speaker, I want to get to yes on the regulatory cannabis scheme, but I don't believe it has enough focus and attention on these products being eliminated, and could make things worse with more products being sold and consumers not knowing if they're safe or not. Our enforcement efforts across the Commonwealth have fallen short. If we can't protect consumers and children when there shouldn't be these products on store shelves to begin with, how do we protect them when we add even more to our market? We cannot keep our kids safe if we cannot get these illicit products off of shelves, if we don't set politics aside and develop an effective and focused enforcement strategy in addition to the work on a regulatory market. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to bet another kid's life on the hopes of finding a regulatory compromise this year. Let's put kids first and guarantee we remove these products from shelves in Virginia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Newport News, Delegate Price.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is EITC Awareness Day. The Earned Income Tax Credit is an essential tool for tax relief in our Commonwealth. For a family of four making $30,000 filing their 2024 tax return, they could see nearly $700 back with our refundable EITC. Mr. Speaker, we've heard much about inflation and descriptions of corporate greed. Well, $700 could help a family afford groceries, gas, utilities, the essentials. So I want to take this Awareness Day to make sure all of us here in this chamber are aware of the number of Virginians who would benefit from continuing our refundable EITC. In 2021, more than 752,000 returns claimed the federal EITC in Virginia. So, Mr. Speaker, if you'll indulge me, that means a huge number of Virginians, including 24,320 in Newport News, 17,650 in Hampton, 30,500 in Chesterfield County. In Chesapeake, 22,200. In Suffolk, 9,670. In Fauquier County, 4,310. In Loudoun County, 18,990. Stafford County, 11,280. Caroline County, 3,240. Fairfax County, 64,830. Just a few more, Mr. Speaker. Spotsylvania County, 12,210. Henrico County, 31,650. Petersburg, 6,110. Dinwiddie County, 3,060, and Prince William County, 39,000. Mr. Speaker, with all of these hardworking families benefiting from our 15% refundability in our EITC, and with Jay Lark finding that both increasing the standard deduction and creating the refundable EITC option made our tax code more progressive and fair, it is mind-boggling that the governor presented his budget amendments and he included a permanent increase in the state's higher standard deduction, but made the choice to let the EITC expire. But we on this side, Mr. Speaker, understand the importance of the refundable EITC and are passing legislation to continue this critical tax policy. The EITC is one of the most proven tax credits in our nation and a powerful anti-poverty tool. So, Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow this critical tax policy to expire on our watch. So I'm thankful to you and others that recognize the importance of Virginia's refundable EITC and look forward to building on this progress in the years to come, so that when we speak of tax relief, Mr. Speaker, we are not leaving more than 750,000 Virginians behind. Thank you.
Did I hear Portsmouth in there anywhere? I was listening. The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Cohen.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Yesterday, the Attorney General released an opinion titled Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation. I can assure you this is the furthest thing from protecting children. This is about hurting kids, about bullying the most vulnerable members of our society. And we all know that bullies hurt other people just to make themselves feel better. You can ask my middle school bullies how that worked out for them. If they want to talk about protecting children, vote with us to help end gun violence. Feed kids. Make sure they have roofs over their heads. But every time, their votes show that they don't actually care about kids. They just like talking about it. Protecting kids, keeping kids safe. That's not what this is about. This is about cruelty. We're supposed to be the adults in the room. And adults don't attack vulnerable kids just to score political points. For God's sake, what is this world we're trying to create? Adults protect kids. They don't weirdly fixate on their bodies. We have families that move here to keep their kids safe. They come here because they believe in the promise that we have made to them that their kids will be welcome here, that they will be able to have life-saving care. Where are their parental rights? My kid believes that here in Virginia, we will keep them safe from people like our president, like our attorney general. And as a mom, I promise them that. My kid still believes that parents don't break promises. Do yours? In the last 24 hours, I have gotten so many calls, texts, my friends coming up to me in the hallways to embrace me, grieving like we are at a funeral. And we are grieving. We're grieving because, Mr. Speaker, this order to end life-saving care will, at the very least, break our kids and destroy our families. And at the worst, children will die. I hope that those of you who support this and those of you who decide to stay silent can live with that. To those who are afraid, to those who feel hopeless, do not give up. Because we will not give up on you. We are Democrats, and we have the responsibility to lead in this chamber. And we believe in protecting kids and families and keeping them safe. And that's exactly what we're going to continue to do. And that's a promise that I don't intend on breaking. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Roanoke, Delegate McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A brief point of personal privilege.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you very much. So I appreciate very much, Mr. Speaker, the delegate sharing the information on the Earned Income Tax Credit. And I, too, agree that many on this side of the aisle, in fact, all of us on this side of the aisle, believe very strongly in taking care of the people that are the most disadvantaged, that are working hard in our society. But what was missing in that presentation, Mr. Speaker, was last year in the governor's budget, the governor's budget expanded the Earned Income Tax Credit above the level that it was at last year, and in fact above the level that it is that is passed in the bill this year in the House. So I guess my question is, are we only for expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit on election years, or is it something that we are for every year? Because clearly, maybe the governor didn't have it in his budget this year because it was taken out of his budget last year by a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Roanoke City, Delegate Rasool.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we return to the first morning hour for the purpose of an introduction?
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we are joined today with the Minnick School. If they could please rise. The Minnick Schools are a group of schools that stretch from the Blue Ridge Mountains to the Chesapeake Bay. They have a 135-year history going all the way back and beginning in Salem, Virginia. Over the years, the schools are a dedicated group of educators who are focused on helping those students with special needs as best they can in so many different ways, giving them academic growth, emotional development skills, and really hand in hand. Just today we were talking about being able to transition children even out of their schools as they're coming back into public schools and ensuring that they have the right services. If you could join me in giving them a warm house welcome. Thank you.
Welcome to the Capitol today. The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The delegate from Chesterfield has made our argument for my bill requiring a well-regulated and well-enforced adult-use cannabis market. I will note that the delegate has not introduced any amendments, and she sits on the committee, the subcommittee that heard the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Munden King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, we indeed have a crisis on our hands. It's a crisis of conscience. Because as I hear my colleagues decry these illegal shops and operators in our community, I can't help but think what would happen if instead of making speeches here on the floor, they walked across Capitol Square and asked Jason Mieres to do his job, Mr. Speaker, because our communities are hurting. But I know I can't expect my colleagues to stand up to Jason Mieres when they have a president in the White House who is attacking thousands of Virginians every day. Federal workers who are waking up and not knowing if they will have a job or be able to provide for their families. A president who is treating mothers and fathers who are providers for their families like some contestants on a sick reality show. And yet I hear nothing from my colleagues on the other side. So, Mr. Speaker, the question for me is simple. Who has the courage? Who will address what is happening in our communities? People who are waiting for cancer care and who rely on Medicaid and federal funding can't afford to wait on a president who has blocked their care, who has shut down their website. Even our own mental health funding, which has bipartisan support, has been under attack by President Trump. And yet we hear nothing from the other side. So instead of spending their time making speeches, now it's time not just to talk about it, Mr. Speaker, but actually be about it. Go do something about it. Talk to your friend across Capitol Square. Talk to your friend in D.C. Stand up for Virginians instead of spending your time picking on vulnerable kids. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The clerk will call the calendar.
Calendar for this last day of January the 31st, 2025. For the Virginia House of Delegates, first category, House bills on third reading, uncontested calendar. 8 bills in the uncontested calendar block, which are as follows. House Bill 2020, over on page 2 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1643, 1804, 1918. Page 4, House Bill 1976, House Bill 2500, House Bill 2507, as well as, in rounding out the third reading uncontested calendar block, House Bill 2696.
Shall the bills pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, no 0.
Ayes 96, no 0. The bills pass.
Continuing with the calendar, next category, House bills on third reading or passage. Regular calendar. There are 13 bills in this category. Top of page 6, beginning with House Bill 1593. House Bill 1593 relates to access to minors' records, records stored or accessible from a secure website.
The delegate from Richmond County, Delegate Kent.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move.
I'm sorry. You have no reason to speak.
I was happy to oblige.
I screwed it all up.
That's
Sit
okay.
down. I screwed it up. I need some coaching. Shall the bill pass? Y'all thought this job was easy. Clerk will close the roll.
Mr. Speaker, ayes 92, noes 4.
Ayes 92, noes 4. The bill passes.
House Bill 1687 is legislation relating to city council voting districts, all via the charter for the city of Virginia Beach.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 69, noes 26, abstentions 1.
Ayes 69, noes 26, abstentions 1. The bill passes.
House Bill 1727 relates to establishment of parent and child relationship, parents who commit sexual assault.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 66, noes 30.
Ayes 66, noes 30. The bill passes.
House Bill 2216 relates to the State Board of Elections, appointment of the Commissioner of Elections.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 94, noes 1.
Ayes 94, noes 1. The bill passes.
House Bill 1609 would direct the Health Insurance Reform Commission to consider coverage for infertility treatment in its 2025 Essential Health Benefits Benchmark Plan review.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 84, noes 11.
Ayes 84, noes 11. The bill passes.
Over on page 8, continuing third reading regular House Bill 1617, now before you, relates to homeless youth fees, certain government documents.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 92, noes 2.
Ayes 92, noes 2. The bill passes.
House Bill 1724 relates to the Prescription Drug Affordability Board established, drug cost affordability review.
Delegate from Fredericksburg, Delegate Cole. Delegate from Fredericksburg, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the motion.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2023 alone, pharmaceutical companies raised the list prices of 112 drugs at rates higher than inflation. These price hikes are not only unsustainable, but often unjustified, Mr. Speaker. While big pharma companies rake in record profits every day, Virginians are left struggling to afford the medications they need to survive. This isn't just about economics, this is about lives. Families across the Commonwealth are forced to make impossible choices between paying for prescriptions and covering basic necessities. I'm sure, like I have heard, my colleagues have heard from their neighbors, like the young mother rationing insulin for her young child with diabetes, or the older couple trying to decide if they're going to buy groceries or buy their prescriptions. Yet for the second time, we are forced to fight for this bill that should have already been law. Our governor claims to be pro-life, Mr. Speaker, yet here we are, watching his administration side with big pharma over the little Virginians that he claims to represent. If he truly believes in protecting life, Mr. Speaker, then he should be standing with us, passing this piece of legislation and signing it into law. Last year, people sang a song, Mr. Speaker, "The Rich Men North of Richmond." But let's be clear, the ones standing in the way of this law are right here in Richmond, and Virginians deserve better. If we truly stand for the people, as I say all the time, for Lottie-Dottie and for everybody, then we must act. We must show our commitment to protecting not just their health, but their financial well-being. And it starts by passing this bill. I would urge my colleagues to pass this, to support this amendment, support this piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Middlesex, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
The delegate has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I will tell you there is no one in this House that is in this chamber that is more passionate about the cost of prescription drug prices and how it affects patients and consumers. It's what I deal with each and every day, a choice of whether to buy groceries or to purchase your prescriptions. Now, well-meaningful, and I do commend, the patron and the comments, but this legislation simply will not work. Now, this legislation actually caps for state-regulated health plans. It sets what we call upper payment limits. These goals, and this is very well meaningful, but similar efforts in other states have proven to be ineffective. States like Colorado and Maryland, ineffective, and they've shown little or no change in making a dent in prescription drug costs. And then when you look at the bulk of prescription drug purchases and the prescriptions filled out there are Medicare D patients, our seniors, the ones that you hear from each and every day that talk about prescription drug costs and high prescription drug costs, they're exempt from this legislation. So then when you start to establish upper payment limits, let's really think about that for a minute. Upper payment limit. And nowhere in this legislation does it address who actually is paying for that. Because this legislation does not tell a manufacturer what you actually can charge for that prescription. At the point, or what the pharmacy is paying, the mail order pharmacy, or anyone that's paying for that medication. It establishes an upper payment limit. So think about that for a minute. That's the reimbursed price on the back end, at the point of sale, okay? So who's paying for that? Someone on the back end. It either goes to increasing insurance premiums, or it goes to the pharmacy who is going to be paid below their cost for that medication. Because nothing is stopping a manufacturer from increasing their drug price after this board establishes an upper payment limit. So by capping these reimbursement rates, insurers, they're going to be forced to make up that difference some way, somehow, and somewhere. Because you can't change their price. And Mr. Speaker, for these reasons, and actually many more, I oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Delegate from Loudoun, Delegate Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak to the bill.
The delegate has the floor.
So I am talking about to the bill from personal experience. I'm 72 years old. I'm a senior citizen. I'm on a fixed income. I know that when I went from an HMO to Medicare, my prescription for a 3-month supply went from $70 to $700. My wife's medication for her pancreas went from $50 to $2,000 for a 3-month supply. We need to do something. And we are fortunate, my wife and I, that even though these costs are incredibly high, we can make it. It means that I'll have to do without, but I'm okay with that as long as we're taken care of. But what about those senior citizens who are not as lucky as I am, who are sitting there, as was mentioned before, trying to figure out, how am I going to make my car payment? Am I going to not eat this week? How am I going to do this? Am I going to cut my insulin? So what I'm saying, as a senior citizen who has experienced these high prescription costs, we need to do something. And sitting around and not sitting there and talking about big pharma, I have no sympathy for them. When we talk about on a federal level, we were managed to get insulin down to $30. That says that somewhere along the line, those farmers are making incredible profits that they never hand down to the consumers. And so my feeling is that this bill is needed. We should support it, and I hope that it's the will of the body that we vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Middlesex, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comments that were just raised on the floor, but I'd like to remind him that everything he just talked about is exempt from this legislation and will not make a dent in that scenario. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Converse Fowler.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We could have did this
to
yesterday.
address the comments that were made, here's the deal. They don't need to raise prices. They don't need to raise the prices. The CEOs and shareholders could make a few million less. This is our job. We are here to represent the people and make decisions based on what the people need and not what's going to pad the pockets of the corporations and big pharma and insurance companies and the CEOs and all those shareholders. So please think about your district and your people, and it's not our job to worry about how much money that those companies are going to make. They can make less money. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The delegate from Stafford, Delegate Milday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking to the bill.
The delegate has the floor.
Yes, pharmaceutical prices are too high. I had 2 bills that were killed in subcommittees on party line votes in the last week. One would have passed through the PBM rebates and pricing concessions at 80% to the consumers at the point of purchase, and the other would have at least taken a step towards sending the message that we're going to take a bold initiative and try to limit advertising, on media and TV advertising for drug manufacturers. In America, we spent about $700 billion on prescription drugs last year. We pay twice as much for pharmaceuticals as all the other industrialized nations in Europe does. The same drugs. Most of those are brand name drugs. The pharmaceutical companies are spending as much on research and development, as much on advertising as they are on research and development, and in some cases, according to their own annual reports, even more. These are gigantic amounts of money, and the PBMs are acting as middlemen, but they're just getting giant kickbacks. If you don't understand how it works, you take some time to look at this and see what's happening. The cost of prescriptions in America is being driven by the PBM kickbacks And the advertising on TV, the hundreds of billions of dollars of advertising that's being spent to not manufacture drugs, but manufacture demand, so that we all know what Skyrizi is and all these drugs you would have never heard of if they hadn't. They spent $500 million to advertise for Skyrizi. And you may not have needed to know about that drug, and you paid for it. These are all built into the prices. That is the problem with our pharmaceutical price issue in America. So I would say that this is a great idea to try to limit it at this level, but it's just not going to have an effect. It's, as I've heard recently, it's like rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. We've got to go after the big problems, and those are what they are. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The delegate from Sussex, Delegate Waxman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also share the same concerns that my colleague behind me has said. I'm a little bit unique. I've owned a pharmacy. I also work for the pharmaceutical manufacturers. For a year, I actually sat in an office not too far from here and involved with setting the prices for some of these drugs. I was also the 7th person in the pharmaceutical industry in the country that was dedicated towards managing managed care at the time. What I did was dealt with the different insurance companies and work with the rebates. Those rebates are what really caused the prices of prescription drugs to soar. The problem is not at the manufacturer, but it's our payment system. It is not a free enterprise system. It's hidden where people focused on things like copays. And when you focus on copays, then the prices of drugs go up to cover the rebates that are demanded by the PBMs. That's what's raising the prescription price cost. One of the things that my colleague behind me mentioned was different prices. If you set an upper limit for reimbursement, what happens to that pharmacy that has to pay more for that reimbursement level than what that manufacturer charges? The manufacturer can still charge the wholesale and the pharmacy above the cost, but the pharmacist is only going to get the reimbursement level below there. We already have a huge problem in the state with pharmacy deserts. I am for containing prescription prices, but I do not believe that the PDAB is the way to do that. States that have done this have not been able to implement things. It's a very long process. The drugs that actually get identified the most are the orphan drugs. Those drugs that are high-cost drugs, but for a very small, limited population of people. If you take away that cost for the high-cost orphan drug status, no manufacturers will be able to develop products for rare diseases, which is something we also need. Once again, I am for controlling prescription prices, but I do not believe that the PDAB is the way to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 52, noes 44.
Ayes 52, noes 44. The bill passes.
Top of page 9, continuing third reading regular. House Bill 1782 is now before you, which relates to newborn screening requirements. Federal Recommended Uniform Screening Panel, Evaluation Rulemaking Report.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 96, no 0.
Ayes 96, no 0. The bill passes.
House Bill 1796 relates to corporations, decentralized autonomous organizations.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 87, noes 8.
Ayes 87, noes 8. The bill passes.
Turning to page 10, House Bill 1945 relates to school boards, student access to telehealth services policies.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 52, noes 44.
Ayes 52, noes 44. The bill passes.
House Bill 1954 relates to public school funding, special education add-on and staffing, at-risk program established, English language learner expenditures, reports.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 61, noes 34.
Ayes 61, noes 34. The bill passes.
House Bill 2124 relates to synthetic digital content penalty work group.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 87, noes 9.
Ayes 87, noes 9. The bill passes.
And last bill in this category, House Bill 2462, relates to unauthorized use of name, portrait, voice, likeness, or pictures of any person, digital replica, civil liability, statute of limitations.
Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 55, noes 41.
Ayes 55, noes 41. The bill passes.
Mr. Speaker, continuing with today's calendar. Next category, new category, House bills on second reading, uncontested calendar. There are about 20-plus bills in the uncontested calendar block. Middle of page 11, first up in the block is House Bill 1646, which seeks to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to vitamins, minerals, and food supplements, practice of chiropractic, definition, Legislative Support Committee on Health and Human Services.
Delegate from Chesapeake, Delegate Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, this bill simply moves the permitted practice of recommending vitamins, minerals, and food supplements from regulation to the Code of Virginia. The Board of Medicine is in the process of adopting amendments to delete outdated and redundant regulations through the periodic review process. This bill simply aims to move the current permitted practice from regulation to the code just for chiropractors. This does not change the scope of chiropractors, and this does not allow them to prescribe anything. Mr. Speaker, I ask that we engross the bill and move it on to its third reading.
Madam Speaker, continuing with the calendar, uncontested block. Next up, House Bill 1777, which seeks to amend and reenact three sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Office of the Children's Ombudsman foster use right to receive information. Legislation Support Committee on Health and Human Services.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, HB 1777 came to me from a group of students at Virginia Western Community College in Roanoke, all of whom are former foster kids. They let me know that most kids in foster care don't know about their ability to file a complaint about their care with the Office of the Children's Ombudsman. And in fact, most kids don't even know that the Ombudsman exists. HB 1777 fixes this by requiring that all foster kids aged 12 and older get notified in writing and then annually reminded that they can bring issues relating to their care to the attention of the Ombudsman, and their complaints will be confidential. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Continuing on page 12 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1853 is next up, which would designate the bridge on Railroad Drive in Smith County the Deputy Hunter D. Reedy Memorial Bridge. This legislation Support Committee on Transportation with Amendment Nature substitute.
The delegate from Smith, Delegate Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move the substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right, substitutes agreed to by one vote. Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, members of the body, HB 1853 designates the bridge on Railroad Drive, also Route 660 in Smith County, as the Deputy Hunter D. Reedy Memorial Bridge. This is in honor of the Smith County deputy officer that lost his life in the line of duty this past year. Madam Speaker, I would like to take this time to state publicly what I've stated privately to members of the body, especially the members of the Transportation Committee. I was humbled, impressed, and grateful for the expressions of sympathy and care that those members gave to the Reedy family. And with that, Madam Speaker, I move that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Next up in the block is House Bill 1861, which would direct each health regulatory board regulated by the Department of Health Professions to establish a licensure by endorsement pathway for qualified applicants of the professions regulated by such board. Legislation Support Committee on Health and Human Services.
The delegate from Newport News, Delegate Price.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. House Bill 1861 is a workforce bill that directs all licensing boards of the DHP to enact regulations to provide a licensure by endorsement pathway for any profession for which such pathway does not currently exist in Virginia. Currently, over 35 different positions have this pathway, and this would add 21 more for a faster and more streamlined pathway to licensure in those professions that do not currently have it. I move that the bill would be engrossed and passed on to its third reading.
House Bill 1877 in the printed calendar has been moved to the regular calendar. Continuing with the uncontested second reading block, top of page 14, is House Bill 1897, which seeks to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Board of Social Work, Board of Counseling, Master Social Worker, scope of practice regulations. Legislation is reported Committee on Health and Human Services, Amendment Nature Substitute.
The delegate from Henrico, Delegate Willett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. Delegate Willett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. HB 1897 will allow master social workers who are not pursuing clinical licensure to provide supervised clinical services. This will increase the availability of professionals in hospitals, social service agencies, independent practices. I hope it will be the will of this body to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
New bill, House Bill 1898, is legislation to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia, all related to optometry, TPA formulary committee dissolution. Legislation, again, was reported to Committee on Health and Human Services.
The delegate from Henrico, Delegate Willett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. HB 1898 will remove the outdated and unused TPA formulary committee from the Code of Virginia, as it's no longer relevant to the management of the optometric profession. This action will reduce unnecessary regulatory burdens on the profession, and I hope it is the will of this body to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
House Bill 1904 at the bottom of page 14 is out of the block over to the regular calendar. Therefore, continuing with the uncontested block, House Bill 1937 is legislation to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Acute Psychiatric Bed Registry Advisory Council, Patient Privacy and Data Security, Virginia Freedom of Information Act exemption. Legislation reported Committee on Health and Human Services with Amendment Nature Substitute.
The delegate from Arlington, Delegate Hope.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. Delegate Hope.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, House Bill 1937 sets up an advisory council on bed registry with the goal to make the data as accurate, complete, and released in compliance with state and federal privacy laws. Hope it would be a pleasure to the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third read.
Next up in the uncontested block, House Bill 2040. House Bill 2040 is legislation to amend the Code of Virginia and repeal one other section of the code relating to speech language pathology assistance, licensure, qualification, scope of practice, revocation or suspension of license, continuing education. Legislation reported Committee on Health and Human Services with a substitute.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Siebold.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move the committee substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. Delegate Siebold.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. HB 2040 establishes a clear path to licensure for speech-language pathologist assistants, officially recognizing them under the Board of Audiology and Speech-Language Pathology. Madam Speaker, I hope it's the will of the body to pass this bill along to its third reading.
House Bill 2042 seeks to amend and reenact multiple sections of the Code of Virginia, all relating to certified public accountant education requirements. This legislation is Board Committee on General Laws with an amendment.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Siebold.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the committee amendment.
Shall the amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment's agreed to. Delegate Siebold.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. HB 2042 addresses the growing shortage of certified public accountants by providing an alternative pathway to licensure, allowing students to substitute a fifth year of college education with hands-on accounting-related experience. Madam Speaker, I hope it is the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it along to its third reading.
Page 16 in the printed calendar, continuing with the uncontested calendar block, House Bill 2065 is legislation to amend and reenact Sections of the Code of Virginia relating to Fire Programs Fund, aid to localities, requirement for emergency incidents reporting. Legislation reporting Committee on General Laws with amendments.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the committee amendments.
Shall the amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment's agreed to. Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The bill requires localities to move to the new federal reporting system, which will help improve fire reporting and also make localities more eligible for federal grants. I hope it is the will of the body to engross the bill and pass on to its third reading.
House Bill 2091 is Delegate Shin's legislation to amend and reenact section of the code relating to the Department of Workforce Development and Advancement powers and duties. This legislation was reported to the Committee on General Laws, Madam Speaker, with amendments.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Shin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move adoption of the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Committee amendments are agreed to. Delegate Shin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Bill 2091 simply matches up state-funded workforce development programs with the approved high-demand occupations list as published by the Department and Virginia Board of Workforce Development and Advancement. Madam Speaker, I move that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Over on page 18 of the printed calendar, next up, House Bill 2093, which seeks to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to adult adoptee access to original birth certificate, contact preference form. Legislation was reported to the Committee on Health and Human Services with amendment nature as substitute.
The delegate from Lynchburg, Delegate Walker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. Delegate Walker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So HB 2093 grants adult adoptees 18 years of age or older access to their original birth certificate. This bill also allows a birth parent to indicate whether they would like to be contacted by the adoptee on a contact preference form provided by the state registrar, with this option to update this preference at any time. Madam Speaker, I move that this bill be engrossed and passed on to its third reading.
House Bill 2110 is legislation to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to Resale Disclosure Act, resale certificate, prohibition on requiring purchaser's name. Legislation supporting Committee on General Laws.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, this bill says that you're not allowed to ask somebody their name before you can give them a Resale Disclosure Act. It was the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Continuing with the uncontested block, House Bill 2134 is legislation to amend and reenact a myriad of sections of the Code of Virginia, all relating to definitions. American Indians, Virginia recognized tribes, federally recognized tribes, sovereignty. Legislation reported to the Committee on General Laws.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Krizik.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the body, House Bill 2134 establishes unified definitions for American Indian, federally recognized tribe, and Virginia recognized tribe. It also amends the Code of Virginia to ensure uniformity in terminology. This bill is a unanimous recommendation of the Commission on Updating Virginia Law to reflect federal recognition of Virginia tribes, on which I serve as chair. This change would bring long-needed consistency and clarity to Virginia's state code. It would also allow the state to acknowledge tribal sovereignty more precisely and would bring state code closer to current federal definitions. Thank you, Madam. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope it's the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
House Bill 2154 at the bottom of page 19 of the printed calendar is over to the regular calendar. Therefore, next up in the uncontested block, top of page 20, House Bill 2203, which seeks to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to Department of Housing and Community Development reports consolidation. This legislation also is supported by the Committee on General Laws.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Bill 2203 allows DHCD to consolidate their 25 annual and limited reports each year into one consolidated report. Hope it be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
House Bill 2307 is legislation that seeks to amend and reenact portions of the Code of Virginia relating to the prescription monitoring program, requirements of practitioners, pharmacy technicians, training programs. Legislation supported Committee on Health and Human Services.
The delegate from Middlesex, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Bill 2307. With this legislation, the first part of the legislation eliminates references to the federal waiver to prescribe buprenorphine for opioid addiction treatment, known as the X waiver, which is no longer required by the DEA as of January 12, 2023. The second part expands options for pharmacy technician training programs to include programs recognized by the Pharmacy Technician Certification Board or National Healthcare Association. This change will increase the education options for individuals who wish to become pharmacy technicians. I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Continuing, Madam Speaker, House Bill 2396 is legislation to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to land records notification system, duties of real estate settlement agent, due diligence, and ascertaining identity of the seller. This legislation supported committee on general laws with amendment nature substitute.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Madam Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. Delegate Simon.
Madam Speaker, as substituted, this becomes a Section 1 bill that requires the Virginia Housing Development Authority to convene a technical advisory group to evaluate the prevalence of deed fraud, including notary fraud, seller impersonation, owner impersonation, fraudulent lien filing, and develop recommendations to prevent it. I hope it's the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
House Bill 2457, now before you, would direct the State Board of Social Services to amend its regulations regarding the application for and use of foster care benefits. Legislation supported the Committee on Health and Human Services.
The delegate from Norfolk, Delegate Glass.
Gratitude, Madam Speaker. House Bill 2557 makes sure that Virginia's foster kids get the financial support that they deserve without the state dipping into the funds meant for their future. It requires local social services to apply for federal benefits on their behalf because they're qualified for it, blocks the use of military survivor benefits to cover costs that the state is already responsible for because the money belongs to the child, and ensures that survivor benefits are protected in a trust or an ABLE account. This bill is about safeguarding stability and not siphoning security. Madam Speaker, I move the bill be engrossed and passed on to its third reading.
Top of page 21 of the printing calendar, House Bill 2468. In the middle of the page is legislation to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia, as well as the portions of the Acts of Assembly of 2024 relating to advanced registered medication aids. This legislation was supported by the Committee on Health and Human Services with an amendment.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Henson.
Madam Speaker, I move the committee amendment.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The committee amendment is agreed to. Delegate Henson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, House Bill 2468 is a cleanup bill of the bill that we passed last year unanimously. Madam Speaker, I move that the bill be engrossed and passed its third reading.
Continuing with the block, top of page 22 of the printed calendar, House Bill 2489, different legislation, same patron. This one would direct the Department of Health Professions to study expanding the scope of practice for physician assistants. A report. This legislation was supported by the Committee on Health and Human Services.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Henson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, House Bill 2489 directs the Department of Health Professions to conduct a study on expansion of the scope of practice for physician assistants in Virginia. Madam Speaker, I move that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
House Bill 2534 would direct the Department of Medical Assistance Services to allow certain crisis stabilization services to be provided in institutions for mental disease emergency. This legislation is reported to the Committee on Health and Human Services with an amendment substitute.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Sewell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House adopt the committee substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The substitute's agreed to. Delegate Sewell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Bill 2534 will require DMAS to amend the Virginia Administrative Code to remove the prohibition that crisis stabilization services for non-hospitalized individuals cannot be provided in IMDs. The Prince William Crisis Receiving Center, scheduled to open later this year, will be home to a 23-hour observation unit and crisis stabilization bed designed for adults and children, and serves as a key component to the robust behavioral health crisis stabilization system in Northern Virginia. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be engrossed and passed to the third reading.
So you add into the argument that we don't know the difference?
I know. Oh, no.
And Mr. Speaker, rounding out last bill, second reading, uncontested calendar block. It is House Bill 2754, legislation to amend and reenact 3 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to behavioral health services, exchange of medical and mental health information and records, correctional facilities. Legislation reported to the Committee on Health and Human Services with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Loudoun, Delegate Singh.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we adopt the substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Substitute is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, this bill calls for the exchange of medical and health information with the Department of Medical Assistance Services, and I move to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bills be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bills are engrossed and passed to third reading.
Mr. Speaker, continuing with today's calendar, House bills on second reading, regular calendar, new category. Page 23 of the printed calendar, House Bill 1656 is by for the day. Therefore, the first bill in this new category, Delegate Simon's House Bill 1888, which is legislation to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to immunity of persons for tort actions based on statements made in connection with certain proceedings. Legislation was reported to the Committee of Courts of Justice with an amendment nature substitute. And, Mr. Speaker, the bill's patron, Delegate Simon, has a floor substitute.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I move the committee substitute and ask that the members vote no.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
The committee substitute is not agreed to. Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, I move the floor substitute.
Shall the substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The floor substitute is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill, so with the substitute here, what we have now is an expansion of Virginia's anti-SLAPP suit. So a SLAPP suit, for those of you that don't know, it's a strategic lawsuit against public participation. And the problem, and Virginia has that already, and it protects people from being sued for things they say at city council hearings and other public proceedings. You all may remember a couple decades ago when Oprah Winfrey was sued by the Texas beef industry for slandering beef. That's the kind of First Amendment stuff that wants to be protected from that kind of suit. What this bill will do is expand the list of what constitutes essentially public participation forums to include things like Title IX hearings. I have a constituent who made a Title IX complaint about a law professor and was founded. Law professor was disciplined. He retaliated by filing a $108 million defamation suit against her. She has been unable to get it barred as a SLAPP suit because the judge ruled that a Title IX hearing wasn't sufficiently a public enough process to give her those protections. This bill would do that. The floor substitute takes out some things I think some members of the subcommittee found objectionable. The original version of the bill had mandatory attorney's fees and mandatory sanctions in cases where there was a finding that there was an anti-SLAPP violation. This bill takes that language out. So all this bill is doing now is adding hearings like Title IX hearings, so statements made at those hearings would be eligible for anti-SLAPP protection. Hope it's the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
House Bill 2590 is now before you. This legislation seeks to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Student Training Employment Pipeline for U.S. Procurement, or STEP, grant fund and program established. Legislation was originally reported to the Committee on Education with an amendment nature substitute, subsequently reported by the Committee on Appropriations with a different substitute.
Delegate from Fredericksburg, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the first committee substitute and ask the body to reject the Committee on Education substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is not agreed to. Delegate from Fredericksburg, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the second committee substitute and ask the body to accept the appropriations substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The appropriations committee substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 2590, the Virginia Step Up Act, established a program to prepare students to careers in U.S. procurement. The Step Up connects students with industry training to improve employability and strengthen Virginia's workforce. A key provision of this piece of legislation allows high school students to graduate with public trust, secret or top secret clearances, providing direct employment opportunities, which sometimes result in salaries ranging anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000 a year. With over 18,000 plus government contractors in the Commonwealth, Mr. Speaker, including many in rural areas, this offers an alternative to college while keeping talent local. Many contractors also fund continuing education, ensuring future opportunities. The NGA in Springfield already runs a similar program, and this bill just seeks to create a statewide model. I hope it will be the privilege of the body to engross and pass this bill on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
Next up is House Bill 1719, which is legislation to amend and reenact portions of the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, landlord remedies, noncompliance with rental agreement. This legislation is reported to the Committee on General Laws.
Delegate from Newport News, Delegate Price.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Evictions harm communities, prevent folks from obtaining safe and secure housing in the future, harm the health and mental health of residents, exacerbate chronic absenteeism of unhoused students, and more. House Bill 1719 would increase from 5 to 14 days the amount of time that renters have to pay their rent before the eviction process can begin, allowing renters a chance to receive their next source of income to catch up on rent before they end up in the costly eviction proceedings. I move that we would engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
House Bill 1758 now before you is legislation to amend and reenact portions of the Code of Virginia relating to surplus real property, prioritization of disposition for affordable housing. This legislation supporting committee on general laws with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Chesterfield, Delegate Gardner.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate has the floor.
Virginia is facing a rising housing shortage that disproportionately impacts lower income residents. At present, there's a shortfall of between 100 to 200,000 units for residents across the Commonwealth. HB 1758 seeks to prioritize the use of public land for affordable housing developments in Virginia's urban and suburban areas. The legislation requires that state and local government entities must inventory surplus and underutilized public lands and prioritize it for sale, lease, or donation for affordable housing developments. This public-private partnership will be encouraged, and land trusts will be eligible for assistance. Leveraging public lands for affordable housing ensures that new development can occur without the high land acquisition costs and drive up housing prices. Mr. Speaker, I move that this bill be engrossed and passed on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
Continuing with the second reading regular calendar, House Bill 1867 now before you is legislation to amend and reenact Section Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, terms and conditions of rental agreement, renewal notice. Legislation Support Committee on General Laws with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Arlington, Delegate McClure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 1867 requires landlords to give 60 days notice if they decide not to renew a tenant's lease. The substitute simply amends the bill with minor changes to reflect that intent. A 60-day notification of lease non-renewal is already required by Virginia Code for landlords who offer month-to-month leases and manufactured home leases. This bill simply brings other landlords into alignment. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be engrossed and passed on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed the third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
House Bill 1919 is now before you. This legislation seeks to amend and reenact a portion of the Code of Virginia relating to workplace violence policy required for certain employers. A civil penalty legislation was reported from the Committee on Labor and Commerce.
Delegate from Hampton, Delegate Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1919 establishes a process for employees to report workplace violence and requires employers to implement protective measures such as emergency response procedures and record keeping. It ensures reports are documented, prohibits retaliation, and it protects employees from civil liability. This bill promotes a safer workplace across Virginia. My hope is that the body will engross this bill and send it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
Turning to page 26 of the printed calendar, next up is House Bill 1940, which would direct the boards within the Department of Professional and Occupational Regulation to develop regulations to provide a pathway to licensure for individuals with equivalent qualifications from another country. Legislation reported on general laws with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Henrico, Delegate Willett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendment.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 1940 is a Section 1 bill that would direct the regulatory boards of DPOR to develop regulations creating a licensure pathway for qualified international professionals. I hope it's the will of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
House Bill 1980 is legislation to amend the Code of Virginia relating to the protection of employees, standards for heat illness prevention. Legislation reported to Committee on Labor and Commerce with several line amendments.
Delegate from Norfolk, Delegate Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee amendment is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This legislation seeks to protect Virginia's workers from heat-related illnesses and deaths for which there are no federal or state standards in place. This bill directs the Virginia Safety and Health Codes Board, in consultation with the Department of Labor and Industry, to create a list of high-hazard industries, those shown by data to have the highest rates of preventable heat-related death and illnesses. Second, the bill would develop new substantive safety standards for those high-hazard industries, including access to shade, water, rest, and new training for periods of extreme heat. I move to engross this bill and pass it along to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1989 is legislation to amend and reenact three sections of the Code of Virginia relating to medical cannabis program, product labels, delivery. Legislation reporting Committee on General Laws with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Askew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Committee substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, HB 1989, the medical cannabis program aims to ensure the patients have clear and accurate information about the products they are using. The bill updates the requirements for labeling medical cannabis products to provide more specific details. Labels on edible and topical cannabis products will now include the total milligrams of THC and CBD in the entire product and the amount per serving. Additionally, for inhalable cannabis products, the label will show the total percentage of THC and CBD. The bill also allows pharmaceutical processors or cannabis dispensing facilities to deliver cannabis products directly to patients, the registered agents, or legal guardians at their residence or business where such deliveries are legally permitted. The bill does prohibit deliveries to a public gathering. Help us to will of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
House Bill 2087 on page 27 is by for the day. Therefore, the next bill before you is House Bill 2098. This legislation by Delegate Maldonado is legislation to amend and reenact several sections of the Code of Virginia relating to labor and employment provisions, application of law, payment of wages, definition of employer. Legislation reported to Committee on Labor and Commerce with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Prince William, Delegate Maldonado.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we adopt the substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, as substituted, helps to address a technical fix in the code where we implemented wage protection law that passed in the General Assembly and signed by the governor several years ago. This technical fix clarifies that teachers are included in this section of the code to be able to have the same rights and protections to their earned wages as other public employees. I hope it will be the will of the body to move to engross this bill and pass it to its third reading. Thank you.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
Continuing second reading regular, top of page 28. Bill before you now is House Bill 2122. This legislation seeks to amend and reenact two sections of the Code of Virginia relating to a manufactured home lot rental act. Landlord obligations. Mr. Speaker, this legislation report Committee on General Laws with an amendment nature substitute.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Maldonado.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that we move the substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 2122 does two things. First, it helps to correct a quick technical fix. Last year, we passed legislation that allowed for all the fees in rental lease agreements to be put up front in the lease, but we did not port that over to leases for our mobile home community, and this bill does that. The second part that it does is for mobile home communities that may be in flood zones, making sure that the lease agreements indicate to them that their homeowner's insurance does not include flood coverage, but allows them, it gives them the information to go check to see if they are eligible. I hope that it will be the will of the body to engross and pass it to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to third reading.
Excuse me. House Bill 2151 is legislation to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, definitions, community land trust. This legislation also is supported committee on general laws.
Delegate from Richmond City, Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 2151 is a technical cleanup bill that simply amends the code to reflect how community land trusts are actually operating. I hope it will be the pleasure of the House to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to third reading.
House Bill 2218 is legislation to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, this time regarding rental payment methods. This legislation supported committee general laws with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Tran.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, this bill requires landlords to accept any lawful form of payment for rent and security deposits, including check, electronic funds transfer, debit or credit card, cash, and money order, and they must offer at least one rent payment option that does not have any fees. Landlords who own 1 to 4 units are not required to accept debit or credit card payments. To accept credit card payments. Landlords must also provide a written receipt to tenants who pay their rent in the form of cash or money order. I hope it's the will of the body to engross this bill, pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to third reading.
House Bill 2266 is legislation that would direct the State Corporation Commission to establish a distribution cost-sharing program for required distribution system upgrades. This legislation reported committee on Labor and Commerce with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Tran.
Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, this bill directs the SEC to establish separate distribution cost-sharing programs for jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional customers for required system upgrades to interconnect new solar generating facilities in our Phase 1 or Phase 2 utility service territories. My hope that this bill will enable more solar projects in our urban and suburban areas like my district, and I hope it's the will of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to third reading.
House Bill 2346 would direct certain electric utilities to petition the State Corporation Commission for approval to conduct a virtual power plant pilot program. Legislation was supported committee on Labor and Commerce with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Norfolk, Delegate Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill to help lower energy bills across Virginia and help us meet our growing demand for energy. Specifically, this bill would establish the largest pilot program in the nation to help homes and businesses put their excess energy back onto the grid at times of peak demand and get paid for it. And just for some perspective, when we did the offshore wind pilot program a few years ago, that was 12 megawatts. This pilot program is 450 megawatts. It is an incredible opportunity to help meet our energy needs, save consumers money, and cut back on pollution. With that, I move to engross the bill and pass it along to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed third reading.
House Bill 2397 is legislation to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Growth and Opportunity Act. Eligibility for grants. Legislation reported committee on general laws with a substitute.
Delegate from Norfolk, Delegate Gass.
Gratitude, Mr. Speaker. I move the House adopt the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Gratitude, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2397 fine-tunes the Virginia Growth and Opportunity Act. It allows the Regional Council to include in its application and for board to consider regional activities that substantially promote the growth objectives described in their plan. This means there can be investments in sectors like the care or creative economies, allowing for smarter, holistic investment, fewer wasted dollars, and more competitive Virginia. Mr. Speaker, I move the bill be engrossed and passed on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
Turning to page 30 of the printed calendar, House Bill 2401 is now before you. This legislation seeks to amend and reenact multiple sections of the Code of Virginia relating to child labor, child engaged in the work of content creation, trust account. Legislation was Board Committee on Labor and Commerce.
Delegate from Norfolk, Delegate Glass.
Gratitude, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2401 requires that a child under the age of 16 who meets certain criteria to be considered a child engaged in work of content creation and be compensated for their content creator as the bill defines, whose video content includes such child's names, image, or likeness, or photograph. The legislation is also aimed to address the exploitation of children in online content by introducing protections for minors who appear in monetized digital media. The bill also established a very clear criteria for when a child is considered active participant in monetized content and requires a portion of that revenue generated to be set aside in a trust account for their benefit. The bill also introduces safeguards to ensure minors are fairly compensated for their contributions to such content, just like child actors. Mr. Speaker, I move the bill be engrossed and pass on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
House Bill 2413 is legislation to amend and reenact 4 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to electric utilities, integrated resource plans. This legislation was supported from the Committee on Labor and Commerce as well.
Delegate from Prince William, Delegate Munden King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2413 comes to us from the Commission on Electric Utility Regulation, also known as the CURE, and it is a bill to CURE, not sewer. It is a bill to update the integrated resource plans for electric utilities. Key changes include extending the planning timeline from 15 to 20 years, changing the filing frequency, and requiring utilities to consider grid-enhancing technologies. A key piece is the stakeholder engagement, where utility companies will be sharing modeling software. I hope it will be the will of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
House Bill 2430 is legislation to amend and reenact sections of the Code of Virginia relating to the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. Fee disclosure statement. Legislation reported Committee on General Laws with amendment nature substitute.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, I move the substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The committee substitute is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, what this bill is actually a bill that Delegate from Arlington, Delegate Lopez, introduced last year. What I did is I stole that bill, changed the words around a little bit, maybe added a little bit of clarity to the definitions, and now I'll be able to go home to my district and claim all the credit for Delegate Lopez's hard work last year. I hope it's the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
Top of page 31, Delegate Lopez's House Bill 2561. This legislation seeks to amend and reenact various sections of the Code of Virginia relating to employee protections, minimum wage and overtime wages, civil actions, misclassification of workers. Legislation reported to Committee on Labor and Commerce.
So I guess you working on a bill that he did last year.
No.
The delegate from Arlington, Delegate Lopez.
Speaking of the bill that I did not steal from Delegate Simon, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill standardizes and updates provisions of our worker protection statutes and simplifies compliance and provides clarity to businesses. It harmonizes key provisions and statutes and limitations in each of our wage and payment, minimum wage, and overtime laws to provide consistency and clarity. The goal here is to make these laws work for workers who need to use them and ensure businesses can have predictable processes to follow. I move that we engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
House Bill 2619 now before you is legislation that seeks to amend and reenact 2 sections of the Code of Virginia relating to private companies providing public transportation services, employee protections. Legislation reported to the Committee on Labor and Commerce.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Helmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
House Bill number 2619 simply affords employees of private companies in a locality that's conducted collective bargaining for transportation to enjoy the same benefits that they would if they were public employees, making sure that we don't outsource to the lowest bidder. I hope it is will of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed the third reading.
House Bill 2597, legislation to amend and reenact a section of the Code of Virginia relating to provisional licenses for assisted living facilities, adult day centers, or child welfare agencies. Appeals. The legislation patroned by Delegate Rasool was reported to the Committee on Health and Human Services with amendment nature substitute, and the bill's patron also has a floor substitute.
Delegate from Roanoke City, Delegate Rasool.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute and ask the body to reject it.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no.
No. Now,
Committee substitute is not agreed to. The delegate from Roanoke City, Delegate Rasool.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now I move the floor substitute and ask the body to accept it.
Shall the floor substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The floor substitute is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is clarifying legislation that simply says that a provisional licensure is not subject to appeal. It will be the pleasure of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and pass the third reading.
And Mr. Speaker, going back, picking up three bills that were moved over to the regular calendar on page 12, if you're following along that way. Bill before you next is Delegate Carlson's House Bill 1877. That is legislation to amend and reenact three sections of the Code of Virginia relating to barrier crimes, peer recovery specialist screening requirements. Legislation report Committee on Health and Human Services with line amendments.
Senator from Albemarle, Delegate Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee amendment is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate has the floor.
House Bill 1877, as amended, modifies the barrier crime requirements for peer recovery specialists to remove the requirement that they have paid all their court fees and fines. It still retains the other requirements that they have served their full time, finished probation and parole, have waited 5 years from when they finished probation and parole, and have no convictions. So just changing the court fees and fines so that these people can get into the important work of mentoring other people who are in substance abuse. And I ask that it be the will of the body to engross the bill and pass it on to its third reading.
We were waiting.
I told him to check me.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and pass the third reading.
Mr. Speaker, page 14 of the printed calendar, picking up House Bill 1904. This legislation would direct the Department of Health to amend its regulations on coverage for nursery services to allow certified nurse midwives, licensed certified midwives, or nurse practitioners with pediatric privileges to be on the 24-hour on-call duty roster. Legislation reported to the Committee on Health and Human Services with amendment nature substitute. And, Mr. Speaker, the bill's patron, Delegate Willett, has a line amendment, floor amendment drawn to the committee substitute.
The clerk, you want to report the floor amendment?
So the floor substitute, the floor amendment to the substitute is simply striking on line 13 of the word newborn screenings and inserting the words nursery care.
The delegate from Henrico, Delegate Willett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the committee substitute.
Shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The substitute is agreed to.
And Mr. Speaker, I also move the floor amendment.
Shall the floor amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The floor amendment is agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 1904 would add a certified nurse midwife, licensed certified midwife, or pediatric nurse practitioner with newborn privileges to the 24-hour on-call duty roster for nursery care in hospitals. I hope it's the will of the body to engross this bill and pass it on to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and pass the third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed to pass the third reading.
And, Mr. Speaker, lastly, in this category, turning to page 19, bill before you now is House Bill 2154, which seeks to amend the Code of Virginia relating to professions and occupations, alternative to education requirement for licensure of architects. Legislation report Committee on General Laws with amendments.
Delegate from Richmond City, Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee amendments.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The committee amendment is agreed to. Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HB 2154 simply permits an individual to complete a professional experience program to be developed by DPOR that will allow an applicant for licensure to meet the educational requirement through experience under the direct supervision of a licensed architect. The existing conventional pathway to initial architecture registration through an accelerated architectural degree and the process for those seeking community reciprocity will remain unchanged. This bill is supported by the Architects Institute of America as it strikes a balance between providing an alternative pathway to licensure while still ensuring architects have the rigorous background and training needed for licensure. I'd ask that the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Shall the bill be engrossed and passed to third reading? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill is engrossed and passed to third reading.
Mr. Speaker, that completes that section. Last category, page 32 of the printed calendar, memorial resolutions laid on the Speaker's table. One resolution in this category, Senate Joint Resolution 322, celebrating the life of the Honorable Henry Levander Marsh III.
Does any member desire to remove a resolution from the block? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the memorial resolution laid on Speaker's table, as listed on page 32 of the calendar, will rise. The resolution is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker, that completes today's calendar.
Per House Rule 51, the House has returned to the morning hour. Does the clerk have any additional announcements or communications?
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. I'll just simply remind the body that Monday is the date due for your statements of economic interest. Talking to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Advisory Council, there are 50 that have been filed, 50 that are open in some state thereof, but those all need to be in by midnight, before midnight this Monday, so bear that in mind as you make your priorities for the weekend. Looking ahead to the remainder of this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Appropriations, the chairman's having that meeting immediately upon adjournment of the House as they get ready for this weekend's activities. So appropriations immediately upon adjournment, they'll be up on the 12th floor as usual. And I believe that it's just committee today, no subs or anything. The Committee on Courts of Justice, the Criminal Subcommittee, is going to be meeting 15 minutes upon adjournment. They'll be in House Room B. Criminal Sub of Courts, House Room B on the second floor. That'll be 15 minutes upon adjournment in the House. And then once the Crim Sub is finished, then the full committee will be meeting, again, all those second floor House Committee Room B. Mr. Speaker, as we look ahead to this weekend, teeing everything up before crossover on Tuesday. On Sunday, the Committee on Appropriations will be meeting at 1:30 in the afternoon. 1:30 in the afternoon, they will be announcing and presenting their various amendments to the budget. So that's at 1:30 up on the 12th floor of the committee, over on the Appropriations Committee room. The Majority Leader will talk to you a little bit more about things on Sunday momentarily. Looking ahead to Monday, when we're next together, there are no, 100 of us, Monday, February 3rd, all the meetings are canceled as we get ready for crossover. So the two caucuses will be meeting at 8 a.m. on Monday. We'll be going in early. We have a full calendar that day. So Democratic caucus will meet at 8 a.m. in House Room 1, Republicans 8 a.m. in House Room 2. Mr. Speaker, that's all the announcements I have at this time.
Delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Mr. Speaker, I move that when the House adjourned today, it adjourned to reconvene Sunday, February 2nd at 2 p.m., and I would like to speak to that motion.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the clerk noted, we are heading into crossover. Sunday is a pro forma session. That means that not everyone has to be here, just 3 of us. I need to be here. So, but then again, just a reminder, 10 a.m. in this chamber, we will start at that time on Monday. And Mr. Speaker, I'll restate my motion. I move that when we adjourn today, we adjourn to reconvene Sunday, February 2nd at 2 p.m.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring, moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to reconvene Sunday at 2 p.m., February 2nd. As many in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring, moves that the House do now adjourn. As many in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion is agreed to. The House stands adjourned until Sunday, February 2nd at 1 p.m. 2 p.m. 2 p.m.